I love it. I love the mountains. I love the fresh air. We're so lucky to live in Sullivan County, where there isn't mass transportation, where the air is clean, the water is clean. We're really very lucky.
We would come up every summer. Usually it was just the three, my grandfather, me. We would drive up. I remember everything about it so much. Like, that was one of the best parts of my childhood, was those trips. My grandfather, as soon as we would pull up to the house, he would be out of the car, into the woods. There's a little spring behind the house, and that was like, the minute he got out, it was to the spring. He would pull out any leaves or anything that had kind of collected there since our last trip, and he had a little tin cup that he kept by it and just drink. And he would, like, offer. I would follow him up, and he would give me the cup. And as like a city kid, there's no springs where I grew up, so that was just always really magical to me, to just like go into the woods and have the freshest, most delightful, magical drink.
I love the water, and we used to go swimming out the back. It's not very deep now, but we used to go swimming off a big rock there, and it was just fun for the kids when I had children, and a lot of fun up here.
But, I mean, I've been grateful for the water being nearby, and it's been very interesting my well is very shallow, so I think it's under 50 feet deep, maybe under 30. I found a piece of paper, but I forget everything. And it's very affected by when they put salt on the road and whatever chemicals are on the road. And also when the snow melt is coming off, it becomes all this murky color. Mm. And as the creeks are the same. It's like the creek water coming into my house. But I've also been very grateful to have the creek nearby, because whenever we wouldn't have electricity or something, we could go get buckets of water. We had water, whereas nobody else had it that close by.
We get our water, and they always have, as far as I know, from a spring that's up on the mountain behind us. That property used to belong to this house and also to my in-laws, and they sold it later on. But there's a cistern that is actually like a concrete cistern there, which has water goes into it, and then there's a pipe coming out of it. It's quite high up on the hill. If you walk up, you'll see it. You realize how high it is when you walk. And it comes down in a hose, which we've had to replace over the years, into the plastic hose. And it goes across the river, up high. My son strung it across with some sort of, somebody said it looked like almost telephone equipment, when they put lines across for telephone wires. But he really put it up there well just recently. It has been taken down a few times. It's a big pain to put it back up. Mm. And then the water comes into the house. So the extra overflow goes over the roof. Mm. One thing is, and I was telling Tom, if you go into the attic here, there actually is a big tank up there. And I think the water used to go into the tank, and then gravity would feed it into the house. So we don't use that tank anymore. But if we turn that water off, the pipes would probably all blow up in the house. They'd explode because of the pressure. We have great water pressure. So that's the overflow. Entire house, so if the power goes out, we always have water.
First summer we were there was no water. Mm-hmm. And here I had two kids, mm-hmm. One kid sort of in diapers and the other one in diapers. Mm-hmm.
And there was no electricity. They had a Delco plant.
So we would hike down to the Trout Creek. Mm-hmm. There, that's the name of the tributary that goes into the reservoir, and I would wash my diapers.
Sure, it's okay. After it flows over so many rocks and stones, it's pure. Am I right?
where I grew up in Woodstock, we
right.
lived a mile south of town, and they put the sewage directly into the
stream?
Sawkill
Right?
at that time. And
Sure.
my mother was worried. It was polio years.
Yeah.
And so she would have the water tested every year, and it was always fine.
Sure.
And she said, why? How come? And it was because of exactly what you said,
Yeah.
flowing over the
That's right. And
So
also,
those aeration
in
plants-
In those days, there wasn't spick and span and all
Right.
those chemicals
The
used to
phosphates.
in phosphates, cleaning our house and being flushed down the toilet or throw the mop pail out.
Yeah.
It was still pure water.
Yeah.
No chemicals. No chemicals.
It's a whole
That's what's
other
killing
time.
us today.
And it's coming with the rain.
Exactly.
It isn't just what we're putting in directly. It's everybody else's too. Yeah.
So that was a story unexpected.
I remember one time I was up visiting a neighbor up the road here, and we were sitting there, and our kids were playing together, and they used to go up and down the valley. Nobody had TV in sundown, and so the kids were like these marauding gangs of little people in their snowsuits, and they decided to walk down the creek all the way down, and they walked to the back of what used to be the Sundown store. I don't know if you know that, where that is. And they walked there, and that's where the water was rushing. So the ice was thinner and less less stable. So they fell in.
Oh no.
We weren't there. We heard about this afterwards, after they fished themselves out in their wet snowsuits. It was so dangerous. It was so scary. And instead of going into my house, because there was a rule, you're not allowed in a house without an adult in it. So they walked all the way up. It was about 5 of them, 4 or 5 of them. And yeah, they could have been swept under the ice very easily, because the current was there.
We didn't harvest the deer that we harvest now. We had many people hunting together to get one person enough food to feed their family. Now you don't hunt in groups. You feel the wind on your cheek. You sense the birds flying, the fish jumping. You know what's hatching, what size things are happening in the water, and you have to adjust and be part of nature.
When his family moved to Neversink,
Yes.
the reservoir wasn't in place yet, right? Or was it in construction?
No, it was not. And that was built around 1948, 50, and it wasn't fully opened yet when Harry and I got engaged, and that was 1951. June of 51, we got engaged, and in October we got married, and I think it opened up just around that time. And my husband was one of the people who worked on the dam. Our people had their homes bought from them by the city, and they took their houses off the foundation and took them by trucks up to higher ground on what was the outskirts of Neversink. And they built new foundations for their homes and put the old homes on the foundations. But I understand that before the city came, that Neversink was a very big town, even bigger than Liberty. That's what I was told by Vic Leroy, who was the police chief in Liberty at the time. That's around 1950-some.
And then I worked on the dams here because they paid the most money. I worked in the tunnels here. I can't remember the dates when it was, but it was a long time ago. No. I also worked in the tunnels. In shaft 2A, where you went down the ground, I don't know, 800-900 feet, something like that, to get the tunnel made for New York City water supply. On some of the construction jobs that I worked for the companies, I was a driller. That's on a machine that drills rock. I worked with blasting, dynamite, caps, that's the unit that sets off the dynamite. In other words, I worked with what they call blasters, you know.
I know from history that there was a big barn, possibly two, on behind my house, and I have had eyewitness account of watching it go down in a flood. In 1928, there was a big flood, and Earl Coddington told me about being evacuated. All the kids were being sent up this road to get out of harm's way, and he remembered walking up, and he'd look ahead and be fooling around with the other kids, and then he'd look down and then look up and then look down again, and it was gone. The barn was gone. No sound, nothing. It was just this quiet whoosh. The whole barn was taken. And so I have that, and then when you look at how the lay of the land, the so-called hayfield, is all sort of scoured, and then since living here, we've lost probably 10 feet of one of our borders.
We were flooded in Hurricane Irene in 2011. It came in the house and it washed all the porch furniture down the river, just about. Yeah, you can see it on the floor. It's sloshed in here. But yeah, it's precarious. My nephew thinks the house will go float down the river in his lifetime, but I hope not.
Well,
but we get scared when there's high water. When we hear the high water, I always move my car over to my neighbor's higher property because I'm afraid the car will go down the river. So yes, and my husband was here. He was in a wheelchair. My husband Duke, he wasn't well, so they had to carry him out and put him across. We stayed in Anne Marie's mother's house for a little while until he went in the hospital. So it was difficult. Yeah.
We back in pretty close to the river.
Okay. And
When it comes
so
out by, we have waterfront property. Because the river has changed so much with the flooding.
Right. How did you fare during the Hurricane Irene?
Not that well. We didn't have any water in the house, but it got in the garage and my beer garden. And, oh, it was a mess. But I have good friends that helped out a lot. They power washed the garage and the beer garden. I had to replace one floor, and I had to take. I have an antique car. I have a 1971 Ford LTD convertible, black with a white interior. I used it to court my wife, and I still have that. So we had 3 floods in a row up here. We had one October 1st, 2010. Then we had Irene in August, I think the 28th, 2011. And then we had another flood September 16th, I think it was, in 2012, which was kind of a local event. Same thing, we had water in the property all over, had to do all the stuff we did before, all over again. So that's when I decided to start building the walls up. And like I said, I built them about 3 and 4 feet high, and they're well reinforced. And I had a lot of help doing it. A friend of mine had a truck, and he brought in some real big stones and a power, a bucket loader to move them. Mm-hmm. So we're in pretty good shape.
Okay, now we will have flood insurance because with FEMA and after Irene, it was mandated. So we have flood insurance, and at first I was very upset. Okay, and then we did find our own insurance broker was able to get a good policy, and so many of us have flood insurance. But during Irene, we never had a flood like that before. And I have pictures where the water was around our house, like 3 feet, rushing, and we couldn't get out. Okay, our kids were outside on the road, we had signs, and we communicated, we were fine. But after the water subsided, he's an electrician. All of us have washing machines, furnaces in the basement, and it was like He said, take the jackets off. All right, let everything dry out. Don't run them until they're dry. Everything worked. My washer, my dryer, everybody, okay? So we were wondering, why do we need flood insurance? I mean, we're self-sustaining, okay? We could do it. But we had no choice. Now, I said if it happens, I'm going to go get the cleaning guy in to clean up the mud. But that's what I'm saying. I think that we all took the advice of each other and everybody helped. Where one knew one thing, one knew another, and we made it through that storm. I want to say the following year, we had, or maybe it was in October of that year, because it was wound up snowing later on, that we had a Goodnight Irene party. In other words, it was behind us. We all were back on track. The bait store, the sundown bait store, I have pictures of it. And it was, completely eroded. It was a mess. But people, the church, okay, they all fixed it. And that's what it's about. To me, that's community and not giving up on each other.
Despite, I know there have been big changes. One of the things I remember when I came with his dad, one year, it was 2011, and we went to go swim at Sholem. My family always called it Sholem. It's just a swimming hole off of Yeagerville Road. And there were all these signs all over the place. No this, no that, no anything. And his dad, Chris, was like, there's a lot of signs here. You're like, are you sure? I'm like, nah, they're not for here. Like, I've been coming here since I was a kid. So we just traipsed down there and, I'm like, oh, the rope swing's gone. We're like, have our bathing suits on. We're swimming. We're having a great time. We started to kind of hike around, and then a guy came and he's like, hey, just so you know, he was really nice. This is no swimming, and he talked to us all about why there was no swimming, what the changes had been. And I was like, oh, so those signs, they were for here. Okay, now we know. And he was like, all you have to do is get a permit, and, this is what you need to do. And if you want to hike, you're fine to hike. If you fall in the water, just try to get out quickly without swimming too much. And we're like, all right, thank you. So that was just kind of a funny thing that, he's like, signs. I'm like, no, that doesn't apply to here. That must be over there, that side. And he was like, all right.
The river has, of course, since all this heavy rain we've had this year, more rain than I think we've ever had, we've got a lot of debris. Right now we have a great big tree that fell into the river. I know that the stream management program is talking about trying to get it out of there or cut it up. They're worried about it going into the bridge. But I don't remember ever having big trees come down the river before. And we used to have a wall out which protected us. I think it was there since the early 1900s, and that's all gone. We have no wall barrier between us and the river now. And of course the sediment. Our bank on the other side of the river is falling down. It's a high bank, probably 40 feet high. The trees are all starting to fall. We're worried about them falling on our water line, so we've taken some of them down. So this is all a new occurrence, as far as I can tell you, probably since 2011 when Hurricane Irene came through. Everything has changed. It's gotten worse, which is a shame. And I don't see it getting any better with the way the planet is warming and the weather's changing all over. We did put in, years ago, they put in $10,000 worth of big rocks out there to try to protect. Those are all washed in various places now. I don't think the owners are now my children, two of my sons and my niece and nephew, and they don't want to put any more money into it. It's a losing monetary venture. Every year they lose money on the place. So I'm very fortunate I get to stay here, and I do put in some money each month to live here, but they still end up having a deficit at the end of the year, so they don't really have the money to put in what would it take. I mean, I was told we'd have to raise up the house up higher, and that's just beyond capability. So I think we'll just use it as long as we can. And that's a very sad statement, but use it and enjoy it as long as you have it.
A benign creek gurgles with deeper notes, hollowed tones circling the rocks. Flowing water has a soft, constant sound. Earth's fragrance seeps through fallen leaves, pungent and fresh. Sunlight filters. Leaves rustle, golden ash in the breeze. I am warmed. Caw! One sharp crow declaring and talking, joined by another responding. They discuss my presence in this patch of woods, unusual now since more than a year, maybe more than 2. Chatty and curious, shrill, short, sharp barks or lazy, gargling rasping. These birds are observers, a team, a murder. The crows will stop commenting until I stir. They already have. I am still. If I stayed long enough, there will be other sounds to know. Remember? This patch of woods once held close children's play. Forts were staked out, furnished with wares from household dump piles, abundant dinner parties of acorns and moss. Raging, once or twice a year, the creek's rush moves so fiercely that waters jump its banks, scouring, gouging, and furiously gnashing, vigorously sculpting the valley, carrying away barns and backhoes, gas tanks and tree ships with full root rigging. Boulders crash. Later, deer families come back here to rest in hollows, gullies scooped by raging currents, and the crows survey anew their alluvial fan.